My family excluded me from their 4 weddings during my childhood for being too young. Now I got married and didn't invite any of them. My mom showed up crying at my house, and my entire family organized an anti-wedding dinner the same day to talk bad about me. I blocked them all and never felt more free. I'm 28 years old. I work as a freelance graphic designer, and if someone had told me 10 years ago that I'd end up cutting contact with almost my entire family, I probably wouldn't have believed it. But here I am, blocking numbers and feeling lighter than ever. The thing is, what happened with my wedding was basically the final straw of something that had been dragging on since I was a kid, and I need to get this off my chest, because every time someone tells me I'm being dramatic or spiteful, I feel like I'm going to explode. I'm the youngest of 5 siblings, and when I say youngest, I mean there's a brutal age difference. Frederick, the oldest, is 18 years older than me. Harrison, 16. Lindsay, 13. And Trevor, 11. Basically, by the time I was born, all of them were already teenagers or almost adults, and I think my parents had me by accident, though they never admitted it directly. I always felt like an add-on, you know? Like that little sister who showed up when nobody expected her, and who basically ruined the family photos because she broke the aesthetic of the 4 older siblings perfectly spaced out. I grew up watching my siblings live their lives. They'd go off to college, get jobs, move out, and I'd stay home feeling like I was living in some kind of museum of what was once a complete family. My parents were busy working, and I spent most of my time alone or with babysitters. It wasn't obvious abuse or anything like that. It was just like existing in the margins of everyone else's lives. But everything changed. I mean, everything got way worse when the weddings started. I was 10 years old when Frederick got married. 10 years old. And I remember perfectly the day my mom sat me down in the living room and explained that I wouldn't be able to go to the wedding because Frederick and his girlfriend, I don't remember her name, they got divorced like 3 years later, wanted an adults-only celebration. Child-free, my mom said, as if that was something completely normal and reasonable. I cried for hours that night, literally for hours, because I didn't understand why my own brother didn't want me at his wedding, and my mom kept repeating that it wasn't personal, that this was how modern weddings were, that I'd understand when I was older, but I didn't understand. I stayed with the neighbor while my whole family went to a fancy wedding at an expensive hotel, and I sat on the couch watching Disney movies thinking there must be something wrong with me. When everyone came back that night, nobody talked to me about the wedding. Nobody showed me photos or told me how it went. It was like I didn't exist that day. And in a way, I guess I didn't. I wasn't in any family photos. I wasn't in anyone's memories. I just wasn't there. 2 years later, when I was 12, Harrison got married. And guess what? Also child-free. By that point, I had already learned that protesting didn't help, so I just nodded when they told me and pretended I didn't care. Harrison was the quietest of my brothers, super serious and formal, and his wedding was exactly like him, basically a catalog-type ceremony at a golf club. Once again, I stayed with someone. I think that time it was my aunt, who watched me. And once again, everyone left without me. The worst part is that I was really well-behaved. I wasn't a problematic or hyperactive kid or anything. I was 12 years old. I could sit quietly during a ceremony. But that didn't matter. Rules were rules. When Lindsay announced her engagement, I was 15 years old. And honestly, I thought this time would be different. Lindsay was my only sister, and even though we were never super close because she left for college when I was like 2 years old, I still thought that maybe, just maybe, she'd want me there. I begged her. I literally begged her to let me go. She had set a rule of 16 years or older, and I told her I was about to turn 16 inches a few months, to please make an exception for me because I was her sister. And she said no. She said rules were rules, and that she wasn't going to change them for anyone. I started crying and screaming, which I never did, and my parents grounded me for 6 months. 6 months. Can you believe it? They took away my phone, computer, I couldn't go out with friends, nothing. Because according to them, I was being a spoiled brat and selfish by trying to make my sister's wedding about me. I remember my dad told me, "On your wedding day, you decide the rules, but this isn't your wedding." And I thought, okay, I guess that's fair, but it hurt anyway. It hurt so much to watch my whole family leave again without me, and this time, they didn't even let me stay watching movies. They sent me to my room to reflect on my behavior. The last wedding was Trevor's when I was 17 years old. I was almost legally an adult. But Trevor also made his wedding child-free, though technically he set the limit at 18 years. What killed me about that wedding is that he invited my cousin, Amanda, who had just turned 18, while I, his sister, was left out again. When I asked him why, he literally told me those were the rules he and his wife had decided, and that he wasn't going to make exceptions. Exceptions, as if I were a stranger trying to crash his party. By that point, I was so numb to the exclusion that I didn't even cry. I just locked myself in my room on the wedding day and watched YouTube videos until everyone came back. Fast forward, like 6 years. I moved out of my parents' house as soon as I turned 18, got a part-time job while studying graphic design, and basically tried to build my own life away from that family that never made me feel like part of anything. I met Julian at a coffee shop where I worked. He was an accountant and came every day for his coffee before going to the office, and we started talking. One thing led to another, and like 3 months later we were officially dating. What made me fall in love with Julian, aside from the fact that he's genuinely a good person and makes me laugh, is that he was the first person who made me feel like my feelings about my family were valid. I told him the whole story about the weddings one night, like a year into dating, and I expected him to tell me I was exaggerating or that I should get over it. But instead, he looked at me super seriously and said, "Your family sounds super toxic, Aurora. No kid should feel excluded like that, especially by their own siblings. You deserve to be at those weddings." And I started crying right there in the restaurant because no one had ever said anything like that to me. It had always been me being the problem, me needing to understand and be more mature. Julian and I got engaged like 2 years ago. It was super sweet, nothing elaborate, just the two of us on a hike through the forest we like, and he pulled out the ring and asked me, and I said yes before he finished the sentence. We started planning the wedding almost immediately because I wanted something small and intimate, and that's when I made the decision that basically blew up my family. I decided not to invite any of my siblings to my wedding. None of them. Not Frederick, not Harrison, not Lindsay, not Trevor, and honestly, at first I didn't feel bad about it. I felt liberated, like I was finally taking control of my own narrative after years of being the secondary character in everyone else's story. Julian supported me completely, told me it was my day and I could invite whoever I wanted. We invited like 40 people total, close friends, some cousins I did have a good relationship with, aunts and uncles who were always kind to me, but not my siblings. The bomb went off when my mom found out. And she found out because I told her directly, like 3 months before the wedding. We went to dinner at my parents' house, something I did very occasionally just to keep the peace. And after dinner, I showed her the invitation designs. She was super excited looking at them, until I told her my siblings weren't going to receive one. She went quiet for like 5 seconds, which felt eternal, and then asked me if I was joking. I told her no, that I was completely serious, that Julian and I wanted a small, intimate wedding, only with people who really mattered to us and who had supported us over the years. My mom put the invitations down on the table like they were burning and told me I was being spiteful and petty. She said my siblings were going to be devastated. How could I do this to them? That family is family no matter what. And I, honestly, laughed. I laughed because the hypocrisy was so obvious I couldn't help it. I reminded her of the 4 weddings I wasn't invited to. I reminded her how I cried every time and how she told me rules were rules. I told her, well, these are my rules now. My dad, who until that moment had been quiet, told me I was being childish, and that 2 wrongs don't make a right. But that's the thing. I didn't see this as a wrong. I saw it as finally setting boundaries with people who had never treated me like I mattered. We left my parents' house that night with my mom crying and my dad yelling at me that I was making a mistake I'd regret for the rest of my life, and I felt weird because I expected to feel guilty. But I actually felt relieved. Like I had finally said out loud something I'd been holding in for years. The drama that followed was, let's say, intense. My mom created a group chat with all my siblings and me to talk about the wedding, and it was basically a 2-hour session of everyone attacking me. Frederick said I was being dramatic about something that happened when I was a kid, and that I needed to grow up. Harrison said he didn't even know me well because I was so young when he got married, and that it wasn't his fault that his values at the time didn't include children at the wedding. Lindsay was the worst. She said, I had always been a problematic child, and that this proved I hadn't matured at all. Trevor simply put a message saying he was disappointed in me and hoped I'd reconsider. I left the chat. I literally just left and blocked them all. Julian found me crying in bed that night and hugged me and told me we were doing the right thing, that I didn't have to justify myself to people who had never bothered to understand my perspective. And he was right. But it still hurt. Because as toxic as they were still my family, and part of me still wanted their approval, even knowing I was never going to get it. The next few weeks were chaos. Family members who didn't even talk to me regularly started calling me to tell me I was destroying the family, that my siblings were hurt. How could I be so cruel? My Aunt Marcella called me crying, saying I was like a daughter to her. Which is a lie. She barely talked to me. And to please reconsider. My cousin Daniel sent me a long message about forgiveness and the importance of keeping the family together, and I blocked everyone. Every number that called to attack me or emotionally manipulate me, blocked. By the time the wedding came around, I had like 15 contacts blocked, including my 4 siblings and my parents. My wedding day was, honestly, one of the best days of my life. We did it in a small, intimate garden, with string lights and wildflowers everywhere. Nothing fancy or formal, just us and the people we love. Charlotte, my best friend since college, was my maid of honor, and she cried so much during the ceremony she could barely hold my bouquet. My cousin Sebastian, who had always been like a brother to me more than my real brothers, walked me down the aisle because my parents obviously weren't there. It was perfect. It was everything I always wanted it to be. No drama, no people criticizing every decision, no feeling judged, just love and support. I found out later, because my cousin Amanda, yes, the same one who went to Trevor's wedding instead of me, told me that my mom and Lindsay organized a Excluded family dinner on the same day as my wedding. Literally the same day. They invited my other siblings, my parents, some aunts and uncles, and basically threw their own anti-my wedding celebration. Amanda said it was super awkward because they spent the whole night talking about how disappointing I was and how I was ruining my life with my decisions. I wasn't invited, obviously, but it still hurt when I found out. Not because I wanted to be there, but because I realized my family would literally rather sit around talking badly about me than try to understand why I made the decisions I made. After the wedding, instead of stopping, the calls and messages got worse. Lindsay somehow got my new number. He had changed the previous one, and sent me a message criticizing my wedding photos that I posted on social media. She said everything looked too casual and not elegant enough, that the flowers looked cheap, that my dress was too simple. And I just stared at that message thinking, this woman literally has nothing better to do than criticize my wedding that she wasn't even invited to. I blocked her again. My mom showed up at my apartment unannounced like a week after we got back from our honeymoon. We went to a cabin in the mountains. Nothing extravagant, but it was perfect. Julian opened the door because I was in the shower, and when I came out, I found her sitting in my living room crying and telling Julian that I was destroying the family and that she needed to talk to me. Julian, bless him, was handling her super well, just nodding and saying he understood she was upset but that she had to respect our space. I told my mom she needed to leave. She tried to hug me, and I pulled away, and that made her cry harder, saying she didn't recognize her own daughter. And I told her, maybe you never really knew me, Mom. Maybe you never cared to know me. She left after that. But before walking out, she told me that when I was ready to apologize to my siblings and fix this, she'd be as there to help me. As if I were the one who needed to apologize. As if I were the one who had done something wrong by simply applying the same rules they applied to me for years. I blocked my mom 2 days later, when she started sending me like 5 text messages a day about how God wants families to be together and how resentment only poisons the soul. I blocked her and my dad, who had joined the attack by sending me articles about forgiveness and the importance of family. And finally, after blocking basically my entire nuclear family, I felt peace. Real peace for the first time in years. It's been like 6 months since the wedding, and I don't regret anything. Julian and I are super happy in our apartment. I'm working from home on design projects I love, and honestly, my life is so much calmer without the constant drama of my family trying to make me feel guilty for setting boundaries. Some of my cousins still talk to me, the ones who understand my side of the story, and Charlotte has been incredibly supportive through this whole process. Do I feel sad sometimes? Yes, of course. There are moments when I think about how it could have been different if my siblings had simply tried to understand me, or if my parents had validated my feelings even once. But then I remember all those nights crying because I couldn't go to their weddings, all the times they made me feel invisible and insignificant, and I remember why I made this decision. It wasn't for revenge, though I know they see it that way. It was to protect myself and to finally prioritize my own peace of mind over the expectations of people who were never there for me when I needed them. Last week, Julian and I were having dinner in the living room. We're one of those couples who eat on the couch watching Netflix. Don't judge us. And he asked me if I ever thought about unblocking anyone from my family or giving them another chance. And I thought about it for a moment. I honestly did. And I told him no. At least, not right now. Maybe someday. If someone takes the real first step of apologizing and acknowledging the harm they caused. But I'm not going to be the one chasing their approval ever again. I spent too many years of my life trying to earn a place in a family that had already decided I didn't fit, and I'm tired of that. My therapist. Yes, I started therapy after all this, and it's been incredibly helpful. Told me something that stuck with me. She told me that family isn't just about blood. It's about who chooses to stay by your side when things get tough, who celebrates your successes, who's there in your worst moments. And when I think about it that way, my real family is Julian, Charlotte, my few cousins who supported me, and the friendships I've built over the years. Those are the people who were at my wedding, the people who really matter to me. So yes, I didn't invite my siblings to my wedding after they didn't invite me to theirs throughout my entire childhood and adolescence. And no, I don't regret it. And if that makes me spiteful or petty or whatever else my family wants to call me, honestly, I don't care anymore. I spent too much time in my life worrying about what they thought of me, and that time is over. Now I live for myself, for Julian, and for the people who genuinely love and respect me. And that's enough. More than enough, honestly.